Hey guys, so I'm going to be installing the Xcessive manufacturing steering angle knuckles and these new spherical caster arm bushings. So I just want to make a video of the install, everything involved in the install, and maybe a demonstration of the extra angle that you get from these. This is the standard street kit with minimal Ackerman. They offer a zero Ackerman kit also, but I wanted to keep the car somewhat streetable, so I opted for the knuckles with Ackerman. I also purchased new lower ball joints, which they provided already pre-cut. They give you this new hardware that's longer so that it can pass through. The spherical bushing, I already pressed this out at the shop. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Once you press it out, this presses right in, and then when you go to install, you're basically gonna press these. That's kind of stuck, but anyways, those will press in, and followed by this cover. So yeah, with the kit also, you're gonna want extended tie rod ends. So these are from a GS300. So to compare it to a IS300, there's the difference in shape, length. Thread pitch is the same, so it'll mount right to the inner tie rod, but the GS, as you can see, is much more longer, so it'll accommodate for that extra steering angle. You can also get longer inner tie rods, which they offer as well. I just happen to have these sitting around, so I didn't need to do that. Moving on, the tools I used, or I'm going to use, is this pickle fork to separate the ball joints, tie rod ends. Obviously the hammer to hit the back of the pickle fork. Crescent wrench for the lock nut on the tie rod. Any kind of pliers will work for your the crown nut. I'm at a loss for words. I can't think of this guy. It goes right through the crown nut. And then yeah, 17 mil, 19 mil wrench, 3/8 half-inch drive ratchets, half-inch drive breaker bar, small extensions, 14, 17, 19 mil socket, and then this guy is a 10 mil hex for the new hardware for the knuckles, the lower ball joints. And yeah, I used also a propane torch for removing the tie rods because they can be seized up in there. The heat helps. And then flashlight and impact. This makes a huge difference. Huge difference. So yeah. Moving on. I've already taken the wheel off. So my next step here is going to be I'm going to loosen the tie rod bolt, or sorry, the lock nut on the tie rod while everything's still together. So that way I'm not trying to fight holding it steady with one hand and breaking it loose with the other. Take advantage of that. And then yeah, breaking all the bolts loose. So I've already taken out, obviously, the caster arm here. So I just took out the 2 bolts on the front cross brace, and then the bolt holding the actual caster arm to the chassis. I guess next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the caliper, give me some space, take off the disc brake, or sorry, the rotor, and then what else do I need to do? After that, separate the tie rod end from the lower ball joint, and then underneath there's the lower ball joint nuts there. Need to remove those. Once that's done, then I can take everything out. So I'm gonna put it on pause and do that. Alright, so I got everything off. I changed up the plan because my caliper bolt, the bottom one, that guy down there, it's pretty seized on there. So I just undid the 2 bolts that hold the whole spindle to the lower ball joint and moved the whole assembly out of the way and just kind of zip tied it out of my way. So the only thing holding it all on is the upper control arm ball joint. Yeah, so I had to use the pickle fork for both ball joints here. I ended up hitting this one with some heat and it came right out with a couple of whacks. So yeah, that's the old lower ball joint. Kind of got mangled from the pickle fork, but that's okay because I'm replacing it with a brand new one, so I didn't care if the boot got destroyed. Same with the tie rod end. I'm just going to take it off, and since I'm replacing it with another one, it's okay if the boot rips. So next, now that everything's out of my way, I'm going to fish the caster arm back in. I find that it's easiest to get this in first and then bolt it all up, and then you can somewhat move at least the whole arm, pivot it on that stud so that you can get it to mount flat on top of here, because that spherical ball joint is very stiff, so it's kind of hard to move around without it being stationary in one spot. So I'm going to go ahead and get that on there and get another update for you. Alright, so here it is, it's in. I started on this side here. What I kind of had to do is push this brace down just enough to be able to fit this past the stud and slip it in there. Another thing to take note is the caster arm, it sits inside of this bracket that holds the coilover, so you kind of have to feed this end in first, like through the hole here, and then fish this onto that stud, because once you get on that stud you can only swing it left and right, and this part of the bracket gets in the way. You won't be able to swing this end in because it will crash before it slides into the hole there. So you kind of have to fish everything in, play a little bit of Tetris. What I ended up doing also was pulling out the coilover bolt and nut here, so that way I had a little bit more free movement with the lower control arm to get everything tightened up, because you basically won't be able to tighten any of these 3 bolts 100% and then be able to move on to the next one. It's just there's too much resistance and tension from that spherical bushing, and trying to line up the holes here with the threaded holes on the caster arm gets really difficult, because it wants to, you got to level it out this way and this way, if that makes sense, because it's on that spherical pivot. So yeah, once you get it in there though, and everything loose, like loosely tightened, then you can go ahead and tighten everything up. Everything will snug up where it needs to go. So that's nice. So next I'm going to move on to the knuckles and the outer tie rod. All right, here it is, all finished up. Everything's bolted in, tightened up. I got the coilover back on. There's our caster arm bushing, mounted back to the control arm. Got the tie rod end. And at the bottom of the lower ball joint, all done there. So all I have to do now is get it aligned, or get somewhat aligned so I can drive it to the alignment rack. So I'm gonna just center my wheel so it's straight, put the wheels on, and then check the toe and see if it's towed in or out on the left and right side, and do the best I can to eyeball it by just loosening this nut here. And you can spin the inner tie rod left or right to either extend the outer tie rod out or suck it in. So now